You know, for a cosplay noob like myself, who's only made one other helmet before, I think this turned out quite nicely.
Ah, lovely. Would you like a cookie?
Actually, yes. I would like a cookie. Sorry, my intelligence is so low, I make stupid starfish look like freak-haired geniuses. Now to start off, I began with a plastic toy helmet from a Halloween store, since I didn't really have a helmet pattern to begin with. I took it and wrapped the whole thing in aluminum foil and duct tape, and after marking the divisions, I cut the pattern into 4 sections, darting each of them to make them flat. Then I transferred the pattern to cardstock paper, gave it a test fit, and then transferred them to foam. I glued all the darts together and pieced the whole thing together until it took form. Giving the foam a bit of warmth with the heat gun made bending it a little bit easier. And with that done, I darted to the next stage of construction. All of these pieces being glued together made a bunch of seams, so I sanded them down with a Dremel and filled them in with quick seal. And that seems to have taken care of that. And that's it for the helmet. At this point it was time to begin work on the mask. This is also a good time to mention that the entire mask was eyeballed and done by hand. I would have used the texture for the games model of the helmet, but that texture looks like this. Not very helpful. Much like this long-haired Asian freak of a samurai carcass. Anyway, I started with the middle part, which is a bit of a pentagon with a curved bottom. It's also got rounded bevels, and I added those using my Dremel. For this next piece right here, I pinned some pieces of cardstock to the pentagon, and trimmed it until it was the shape I deemed appropriate. I transferred that pattern to a piece of 4mm foam, and glued that to the pentagon. For this piece with the eye lens, that was done in the exact same manner. Cardstock paper, transfer to foam. I gotta say, I'm pretty well stocked on this paper. It's nice that they let you keep failed prints. And so with this piece, I cut out the eye socket, which, gosh, sounds kind of gruesome out of context. I glued those 2 pieces together and then added them to the pentagon. Now it's really taking shape, isn't it? Next thing to do was this breathing filter here. For that, I took a piece of 10mm foam and cut a 7cm circle out of it. And then with my box cutter, I scored a crisscross grid pattern and expanded those cuts with a heat gun. And after adding some detail pieces, I glued the whole filter straight to the mask. For the side or cheek pieces, that was also done the same way as the previous pieces, only this time they were a little bit too big. So after adding those pieces to the mask, I marked with a Sharpie where I felt like I needed to trim them, and did so using a box cutter. And with the base of the mask complete, it was time to begin adding the detail. I already did the filter, so the next thing to do were the eye lenses. For those, I took a piece of 2mm foam and cut them out in the shape of those lenses, but just the outline because you need to be able to see through them. The lens itself was made using a piece of red clear plastic film that was superglued to the 2mm foam, and then the whole piece was superglued straight to the mask. And this was done for both lenses. The next piece of detail to do was the fan, which I wasn't entirely a fan of. It was kind of tricky and made my head spin a little. I started by stacking together 2 layers of 10mm foam and cutting an 11cm circle out of it. If you look closely here, you can see some exposed cabling, so for that, I scored the side of the circle with a box cutter and gave it a bit of heat gun treatment. And to cover some of it, I added a piece of 2mm foam around the entire circumference. Then I scored and expanded the cuts much like I did with the filter. And once that was done, it was time to start doing the fan blades. I marked where all the blades would go with a Sharpie, and cut everything out with an X-Acto knife. This piece was also 2 stacked layers, the bottom layer being the big fan blades, and the top layer being the little fan blades, and also the rim around the circumference. After that, I just needed to
trim out the fat.
And the fan was complete and glued to the mask. Now there are a whole bunch of detail pieces on the right side of the helmet here, and for those I hand drew the pattern with a Sharpie. Some pieces made with 4mm foam, some pieces made with 10mm. All of those pieces were glued to the top of the helmet, except for this headphone speaker, that was glued to the mask. Now I could have called it good at this point, because surprisingly, the model of the helmet in the game actually doesn't have tubing on the right side. But the portrayal of this helmet from the game's main menu shows that there is one there. And looking at my helmet in this stage of the construction, it did feel incomplete without it, and I feel things would have gone down the tubes if I didn't add it. So I took a rubber 1-inch hose and superglued it to a hole in the mask that I cut out with an X-Acto knife, and did the same thing with the smaller one right next to it. And with that, the mask, and therefore the entire helmet's construction, was complete. To put it on, there's a Velcro strap on the back, and a couple of magnets, one on the forehead and one on the top of the head, to keep the top part of the helmet in place. After covering the red lenses with painter's tape, I sprayed on 2 coats of black PlastiDip to act as the primer, both for the mask and the top of the helmet. As far as the paint job goes, it was pretty simple. The entire mask was stippled with metallic silver, and the top of the helmet was also stippled with burnt umber. To make this helmet look like it had seen some action and to kind of give it the vibe that it belonged in a wasteland, I gave it some significant weathering. This was done using a Copic marker airbrush that sprayed the ink of a dark bark marker. I applied this pretty much everywhere, particularly in the nooks and crannies where dirt and grime would most likely nest themselves. I did not do that for the lenses though. I painted dark brown around the edges for that. I added quite a lot of highlights too for the sake of making the edges pop, and for that, it was more metallic silver. There's some numbers spray painted on the sides of the helmet, and so for that I hand drew the stencils and cut them out using an X-Acto knife. I didn't have any white spray paint at the time, and I was too friggin' lazy to go buy some. So I just used white PlastiDip that I happened to have from when I made the Lin Blade, which I did make some videos on. You can watch them here. Both stencils were done the exact same way, and after removing the cardstock paper, the PlastiDip made a whole bunch of ugly splotches.
God, but are you ugly.
So to fix those, I applied some black paint and restored the metallic silver. And because I wanted to dirty this helmet up, I liberally stippled more burnt umber onto those white numbers. And with that, the Ranger helmet is complete. I love how it turned out. It's just the lenses fog up after wearing it for a while, which is kind of annoying and makes me see red a little bit. But externally, I think it looks great, and I'm happy with it. And I'll be proud to wear this at the next convention. I love how it looks. But, I mean, I can still see through this. I mean, as much as an Asian person can see. Which isn't great. I mean, you can literally blindfold us with dental floss. But yes, this is going to be part of my cosplay project for 2019, and I'm certainly excited to make the videos for the rest of the pieces. I've already got the dark brown linen for the overcoat, which is probably the next piece that I'm going to do. And hey, shout out to Relic of War for his anti-material rifle. For your first prop, that looks great, especially with wooden parts. Super proud of you, man. Keep it up. I want to see where you go from here. Anyone else watching this, if you decide to make something that's inspired by my content, please send me pictures of whatever it is that you made. Either through Facebook or Instagram, or even Etsy if you want. I want to give my viewers shoutouts like that at the end of my videos. Now, if you would like me to make that Ranger helmet for you, there's a link in the video description that will take you to my Etsy shop. You can just go ahead and order one, or contact me and we'll go from there. Although at the moment, I already have a bunch of commissions in the queue in addition to the stuff I'm making for myself. So it is going to be a long time before I can work on an order that I receive right now. Just a heads up for you. If you've got any suggestions on stuff for me to make, or you've got feedback for the content itself, the comment section is the best place for that. I read and reply to every single one of them. And a subscriber count higher than 193 is always nice, but that's entirely up to you. Thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next build, my friend.